Right. Good afternoon. So this is the meeting of the Bills Committee on Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill 2013. We've got a quorum already, so I think we can now invite the administration in. On the 3rd of December, members raised a number of issues. We asked the administration to provide written replies. And so with regard to the issues raised on the 3rd of December, the administration has already given us a written response, and this is paper CB2 5751314/01. So I will invite the Deputy Director to take us through the paper. And then we had another meeting on the 6th of January. We met a number of deputations, and after the discussion, members asked the administration to provide a consolidated response. And the response was issued on the 10th of January. This is paper CB2 6531314/01. I believe members have all received these papers. So can I now invite the Deputy Director to take us through paper CB2 5751314/01, and then members can give their comments or ask questions. Yes, Deputy Director, please. Yes, thank you. So paper CB2 5751314/01. Now, at the meeting on the 3rd of December last year, members wanted us to provide supplementary information on the background of the Village Representative Election Ordinance, the Kaifong Representative Election System, and the requirements on the maximum amount of election expenses. So I want to say that, in fact, the ordinance was passed in 2003, and then there were some amendments passed. Now, we also explained in the paper why Chang Chau and Peng Chau were not indigenous villages, but rather market towns. And then we explained the rationale behind the Kaifong representative election system. Now let me say something about the principles. Now concerning the rural elections, we want to, as far as possible, respect the existing arrangements if they are effective. And second, we want to, as far as possible, respect the wishes of the rural committees. In fact, we consulted the Chang Chau Rural Committee and the Peng Chau Rural Committee. We asked them whether they supported the election arrangements outlined in the bill, and they reiterated that they supported such arrangements. And then third, now, we have this first past the post system, which is in fact the most democratic arrangement. We hope that if the candidates can get more votes, they will be regarded as more representative. We've taken into account the views of the rural committees concerned our own policies and arrangements. We are of the view that the existing election systems have proved to be effective, and the residents are familiar with the existing election system, and so we propose that the present election system be kept. And then we have provided members of some additional information on the maximum amount of election expenses. Members asked about the situation of joint electioneering activities. Now, we pointed out that under the ECICO, there two or more candidates can carry out joint electioneering activities, but then the expenses have to be shared by the candidates on a pro rata basis. Then the EAC has issued election guidelines on various election-related activities. For example, for VR elections, there are certain requirements and guidelines with regard to the electioneering and advertisements. And so, in future, for the Kai Phong representative elections, the EAC's guidelines will have to be followed. So our policy objective is to set the maximum amount of election expenses based on the number of electors. And then I would like to say something about paper CB26531314 And members wanted us to give more information as to whether Chang Chau was an indigenous village or not. And we've outlined in the paper why we think Chang Chau is not an indigenous village. In 1898, it was not an indigenous village, it was a market town. And in fact, the list of established villages states very clearly that Chang Chau is a market town. And what is more, Chang Chau is not included in the list of recognized villages under the anti-small house policy. And so we are of the view that Chang Chau is not an indigenous village. When there were proposed amendments to the ordinance in 2009, there was a detailed discussion on this issue, and detailed information was provided by the administration to members. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thank the Deputy Director for his explanation. So do members wish to ask any questions concerning these two papers, please? Ms. Sit Ho. Yes, thank you, Chairman. According to the official, Chang Chau is a market town and not an indigenous village. But then I've received some papers from the residents, and for this paper, there isn't a serial number because this is an annex to a written submission from a deputation. This is a photocopy, and it reads Hong Kong Government Gazette. And I can't see the year clearly. I can see the date, 15th of July. This, I don't know whether the officials have got this paper. And it says village here in this Gazette notice. So I want the administration to explain this to members. Yes, thank you, Ms. Ho. No, in fact, there was a Gazette notice in 1899. And it was made under the Local Communities Ordinance. The objective was to divide the NT into various parts to facilitate the administration of those areas. And that Gazette notice had nothing to do with village representative elections. Now, according to the to the former electoral records, the order was repealed in 1910. Yes, I understand that the Gazette notice contains the term village, but I believe the word village in that Gazette notice was used in a general sense. But then according to the block lease of land in the NT, there are names of many villages, but Chang Chau is a market town, not a village. Dr. Chen. Yes, Chairman. I've got a few questions for the administration. Last time when we met the deputations, in particular deputations from Chang Chau and Ping Chau, they said that there was no monopoly, and you said that you could not provide us with information on the maximum election expenses, and I can understand your difficulty here. But then there were candidates who were independent candidates, and they were elected. So I want you to tell us the number of votes that they were able to get. This is for record purpose. In fact, I asked a similar question after the public hearing. I asked you to provide the information to us for comparison purpose in the future. This is the first point. Second, I understand that there is a residence requirement registered as or 3 years of residence if one wants to be registered as a voter, and 6 years if one wants to be a candidate. And it says the main residential address means his only address or where he resides. So that's in fact Appendix B of a previous paper. I just want to know whether you are adopting or adhering to the same definition, because last time in the district council election there were some controversies as to what was meant by ordinarily resident. We understand that there are some indigenous villages in the NT. They are village representatives, but they are not ordinarily resident in the villages. They may live in the urban area because they want to live near to their workplace. And this is still acceptable. So do you really require residential proof, 3 consecutive years for registration as a voter, and 6 consecutive years for registration as a candidate? Now, I of course do not want to see any gray areas, but I just want to know whether this requirement can really be observed, and whether there may be problems in some villages. For example, some of the villages may not be ordinarily resident in the villages. Mr. Chairman, now concerning whether independent candidates were able to win the elections when the elections were held in an administrative manner, I can give members some information. Last time, 2,505 persons cast their vote. Ping Chao or Chang Chao? Chang Chao. And one candidate got 653 votes and was elected, and he did not conduct joint electioneering with other candidates. So there were cases of independent candidates winning the elections. And then Peng Chao, there were 2 groups competing for the seats, and each group secured some seats, and there weren't any independent candidates. You were referring to the last election, yes, correct?
And Mr. Chan's other question about the residence address. Now, to answer your question, the Kai Phong representatives arrangement is to use the existing village arrangement. So whether you are a candidate or a voter, you need to know the area you're representing. And because the number of voters is small, we don't want any illegal kind of voting arrangement taking place. Now, because in the existing arrangement, we have been pretty satisfied, and we would therefore transfer the system to the Kai Phong representative election. So this requirement of ordinarily resident is going to be applied. So that's our suggestion. So this will be the ambit of the election office, though, or for the HAD's role to monitor. Yes. And should controversy arise, the HAD will rule on this, and we will also handle the appeal mechanism. But later on, there will be some sort of a tribunal to rule. There would be an independent ruling. Amsterdam. Now, I think the amendment today, well, the crux is not on the name, obviously. Now, if you are talking about Cheng Chao and Peng Chao, the controversy mainly rests with Cheng Chao. The bone of contention is that, okay, somebody claims to be an indigenous person, and maybe the government cannot verify that. And so, similar to other Kaifong representatives, it differs from the election of village representatives. So this is dependent on whether you recognize it to be indigenous villages. And this contention, as far as I'm concerned, you should seek clarification as to whether the village itself is an indigenous one, rather than somebody claiming to be indigenous. So I'm in favor of using the existing mechanism. So the KFR will be elected from the 37, and then the voters will vote. Now, I think there is bound to be controversy anywhere when you have election. And even the Pan-Democrats, okay, they like the proportional representation, and maybe this should be applied to the district councils. So there are pros and cons, whichever system you use. So the views or the areas of discrepancy should be given to them, thrown, and then the government can decide. Because if you were to make amendments now and then you draw up different parts of the map, areas A, B, C, D, and so on, it will only be more confusing. Now, so what I'm saying is the present system has been working for quite some time, and I support the government's proposal to retain the present system. Okay, right. So we had discussion on whether it's a village or market town, and in 2009, in the past scrutiny, we also had ample discussion on this. Mr. Albert Ho. Now we have two questions facing us. Those who claim to be indigenous representatives, there should be an indigenous VR representative. Will they be dealt with illegally or unlawfully? Now, but the government says that they are not really indigenous villages, even though they claim to be indigenous villages. And this is a legal point, I think. Now, if they have the legal right, then they can resort to going to the court. Well, based on certain precedents, and if the legal advisor thinks that it is something we can solve here, and if both sides stick to their own points, then we may have to resort to the court. I think they presented their views, I mean, all the way back to 1989, but then the government did not agree, and there was an election quoted on the village election system, and they wanted to have this, but then in the 1995, the arrangement was stopped. I think that was said last time, but I'm not too sure. Now, but that is not the main point. By 1999, they did not continue with the village election. Now, but no matter what, now, should this be included in the primary legislation, or whether we have a double village representative system, I think the government should be very serious in thinking about the legal consequences. And as members here, I don't see much point in arguing the legal points here with you. If they want to, they can take it to the court. Now, the second thing is for the Kaifong representative election, it's a separate issue. Now, compared to the villages, they are non-indigenous elections. So it's a matter of election that they want to speak on. Now, you have so many seats, and if people want to have one single vote, you may have one or two elected. But then sometimes people can just elect all. But this is like electing the NPC representative. No, I don't think the two systems are the same. You can choose one or elect one, you can elect 37. No, but in the case of the NPC, for 1200, you have to elect all 1200. So this is slightly better, right, than the mainland arrangement. But I think Mr. Leung is right in saying that the proportional representative is quite good. And I ask myself, well, why don't we use that system? So you can have that name list. You ask the villagers whether they remember the 30-odd people. I don't think so. And I think this is true for the NPC election. They need a magnifying glass to read who those people are. But this is a small area geographically, but you're now talking about 30 plus representatives. So I think that is not necessarily the best way to proceed. Now, for district councils, you can split it up into two parts. But then they would say that, oh, okay, they are competing one another and not thinking about the common good. But in fact, how big or are the two areas combined? They would look at the benefits holistically rather than just looking at the eastern region or the western region. So I think in order to be truly representative, they may be genuine indigenous people, but then they may not get elected. So I like to see a more inclusive system. Some may claim that they are, the third generation, fourth generation representative, but then they are not represented. So I think a more inclusive system can reduce controversy. They seem to be saying that if you allow only 3 or 4 into the whole system of 30 plus, that would create a lot of chaos. But I don't really share that view. Or maybe you can put a limit on the number of votes that people can cast. For 37, you can only elect 10, for example. Will that be better? Mr. Lee. Now, thank you for your question. Now, for the rural election legislation, whether you're talking about villages or kaifongs, one important principle is that we should respect the tradition and the existing arrangement, as well as the views of the rural committee. Now, the present arrangement for Cheung Chau is at most at most 39, or from 1 to 39, and for the rural committee would like very much to retain this system. Now, under this principle and this viewpoint, now we have discussed with the Hung Yee Kuk in detail, and both parties have agreed that the present system and the tradition should be respected. Hence our presentation. Now, on proportional representation, yeah, we did consider that and discuss this with the Hung Yee Kuk. Now, but this will differ from the existing arrangement, and under the present administrative arrangement, you have about a few hundred of representatives, of 400 plus in Changchao, and those getting 200 plus will already be elected. And in the last round, the lowest vote obtained was 500 plus, and they are pretty representative. So we have considered the views of rural committee, and as said by previous speaker, there are pros and cons in each and every system. But we are of the view that the present system, when somebody can only cast a maximum of 39 votes, this will be the best system. Of course, they may not elect all 39. They may choose only one. Well, what about other systems or other methods of election? Now, you have considered all the other options, and you have the view that you want to stick to the present one. Is that right? Yes, that's correct, Chair. Yeah, we discussed with the Cook, and we are of the view that the present proposal is best for Cheungchao and Pingchao. Now, if you like it, then you say that this is a tradition. But if you don't like it, then you say that you want to break free from the tradition. So you have this Wang Wai-chak case, and they in that scenario there's a monopoly of the land, and if you want to take the land back, then you have to legislate. Now, I'm not trying to side with them or to fight for any village houses. Well, as queried by Mr. Chen Ka-lok, but then we want to be consistent. The Wang Wai-chak Tong case, with a very long history. Now, you cannot just consider the views of the Kai Fong and then ignore that case. You cannot just listen to one side of the story. Now, these people want to have some sort of representation, and when they came on that day, some people gave the impression that you cannot allow some people to join our committee, and this is trying to be monopolizing everything, and that is not a good thing. Okay, now occasionally you may have an independent voice joining the committee, but this is rare. And he may actually be a dissenting view, but then the majority will obviously win the day, because you would score 35 out of 37, so that should not create any problem.
So if I can't convince you today, then I may have to move an amendment, and then there will be a debate at the LegCo sitting. Now, so you're not having smaller constituencies, and having this block vote system. And do you know that joint electioneering efforts will be very effective? Say, for example, what if we have 30-odd people conducting joint electioneering? In fact, it will be very, very difficult for an independent candidate to get elected. Now, I want to say that I'm not particularly friendly with Wang Wai-chak Tong. In fact, there were in the past, so in fact we were not able to see eye to eye on certain matters. Now, with regard to the Wang Wai-chak Tong issue, that was not a government motion. That was in fact a private member's motion. That was in July 1995. But I believe the administration supported the motion. That was in fact part of the government's policy, right? I'm just pointing out to you the fact that it was not a government motion. It was a private member's motion. Ms. Alice Mack. Yes, thank you, Chairman. In fact, what I'm going to say, in fact, is simple. Now, there are some people in Cheungchao who feel that they are indigenous villagers or residents, and they are of the view that the election system is very unfair to them. they want to elect their representative, but then they're not allowed to do so. So can the deputy director talk to them and try to understand what difficulties they face? And can you make sure that their voices can be heard and reflected in the Rural Committee? I agree with Mr. Albert Ho that we should be as accommodating as possible. At the moment, these people feel very aggrieved. They are of the view that they have these rights, but then they have been these rights have been taken away from them. So let's see what we can do about this situation. In fact, we're not proposing to change the election method. We're just seeking to change the name of the election. And we hope that when the next election comes, there will be a regulatory mechanism in place. In fact, some indigenous villages have said that the election method is unfair to them and they are unable to elect their own representatives. And so if we change the election method here, then some villagers may feel that their election method should also be changed. So, Deputy Director, what's most important is that we must not make these people feel that they have been deprived of their rights. Yes, I agree that it's important to communicate with the residents, be they members of the Wong Wai Chak Tong or not. In fact, the district office islands has the responsibility to communicate with the residents. In fact, the district office on a regular basis communicates with many of the deputations who appeared at the public hearing. We try to explain to them the policies, and when the and we'll explain to them that if they want to enter the Rural Committee, then they can do so through the established channels. And I think it's always good to have more communication with the residents, and we'll try to step up communication with them. Deputy Director. I hope you can relay this message to the staff of the Islands District Office, and that is, in future, if there are developments on Cheung Chau, apart from consulting the Rural Committee, please also consult the residents and the local organizations, so that they will not feel that they are always kept in the dark. Yes, we'll continue to step up communication with the residents. Mr. Chang Pan. Chairman, Cheung Chau is not a big place. In fact, the population of Cheung Chau is only that of 2 district council constituencies. In fact, I understand that Cheung Chau is a small community, and there are close ties among the residents. The residents have been very united. They always try to help each other, and I think there is a strong sense of neighborhood on the island. And I don't think it's really advisable to cut up the island into small parts or constituencies. At the moment, voters can cast 1 vote or 2 votes, in other words, from 1 to 39 votes. We are of the view that this election method is rather civilized. Now, some may suggest that the election method be changed, but I think if we really do so, that would mean taking a step backward. People living on the island want to have more choices. Under the present system, they have more opportunities of electing people who can represent them. No election method is perfect. Yes, we understand that there are minority voices, for example, Wong Wai Chak Tong, and as Ms. Alice Mack has pointed out, the district office should step up communication with them. This is an established election system and has proved to be effective. And if we introduce major changes to the system because of the suggestion of a minority group, that would not be advisable. And I agree with the administration that on this occasion we should only introduce minor changes. The administration should continue to step up communication with the residents, and I really do not want to see the matter going to court. Yes, Chairman. In the 1990s, we had many rounds of discussion in LegCo on Wong Wai Chak Tong. Members were of the view that it was unfair that if landlords wanted to sell their property, they had to go through Wong Wai Chak Tong. So Wong Wai Chak Tong was acting like the government on Cheung Chau. But then there were some agreements, there were some documents, and as a result, the government said that it could not overturn the agreements. And then finally there was a private member's motion. In fact, the residents at that time really resented the status of the Wong Wai Chak Tong. So the issue of Wong Wai Chak Tong was resolved. And I don't think we can really influence the residents' views about Wong Wai Chak Tong. Mr. Albert Ho is of the view that the outcome of the elections was not too reasonable. No, but I don't think we should make changes because of this. Because in future, for the candidates who lose, they will say that the election method should be changed, and will end up having a situation now we see in Thailand. So for those who've lost in the elections, they should look at whether they haven't done their electioneering well, or whether they haven't been able to win the support of the residents. And we shouldn't use this reason to change the election method or the election system. And I think we should keep the existing election system. Thank you. Dr. Kenneth Chen. Thank you. Now I'm thinking about the difficulties associated with voter registration. So according to your paper, you do sampling checks or verification, but then you have a residency requirement. You're not just checking the residential address or the address. In fact, Hong Kong people can have more than one place where he or she is ordinarily resident. Now, or maybe he is a registered voter of a constituency in Cheung Kwan O, and yet at the same time he still rents a flat on Cheung Chau on Peng Chau. And that has continued for 3 years or 6 years. So I just want you to tell me whether you know what is happening at the moment, because I understand that my understanding is that these are very stringent requirements. There is no gray area. There are these duration of residence requirements, 3 years and 6 years respectively. I just want to know whether you've encountered such difficulties in administering VR elections. Deputy Director. Yes, Chairman, thank you. Concerning VR elections, we do all we can to make sure that the information on the register is true and correct. We of course carry out sample checks, and we also carry out cross checks with the REO. And say if he is a public housing tenant, then we will cross-check the information with the housing department. So we're doing this for the VR election because there is already the legislation in place. But then for Kai Phong rep elections, we'll have to first legislate first. With regard to the 3-year residency requirement, now these prospective voters have to declare that they fulfill the requirement. And then we look at the facts, whether they've really lived there for 3 years, and we'll require them to produce residential address proof. And if they fabricate the documents, then they will have breached the law. The VR elections have been held since 2003. We have been operating the system, and we have had experience in checking and verifying the relevant information. And so we can make use of our present mechanism when the Kai Phong rep election system is brought under regulatory or statutory control. So in other words, when you verify the information, you'll not find someone who is a voter of a constituency in Cheung Kwan O and at the same time wanting to become a voter on Cheung Chau or Peng Chau. Now you are saying that these prospective voters need to declare that they can fulfill the residency requirement. Under the bill, can you require the voter or the candidate to produce a residential proof and the proof of duration of residence? And is it that if you find that they can't produce such proof, then that would amount to a breach of the law and you can take prosecution action? Now, I understand that apart from carrying out sampling checks, the administration also relies on a complaint system. I can tell you that an incumbent district councillor owns an ancestral house somewhere. But he doesn't live in that house, and in fact, ultimately he was imprisoned. So if someone provides false information or makes false declarations, that would amount to a breach of the law. Chairman, now, of course, I study politics. Of course, I hope that the election system can be fair and reasonable, but I understand that we also need to respect traditions and conventions. But I just want to say that when a new mechanism is in place, there should be a review. At the same time, there will be voter registers, there will be maximum election expenses, and all these will help to make the elections fairer. So I have to weigh I need to weigh the pros and cons. I do have other views concerning the election system, but I think that can be done after the review, and I think you should give us a paper for the record concerning the performance of independent candidates in past elections.
Now, if you have experience working for the villages, you would realize that the voters' qualification applies to all the villages. They are the same. And some villages cannot have their village representative because they cannot claim to have lived there for a long time, because some of the villages have poor conditions, no electricity, no water. So you dare not claim to have lived there. And so these villages end up not having any VRs. Now, everybody knows whether he or she has been there for a long time because you would have seen that person. So there's no need to worry about the qualification for the candidates. Now, after the present round of amendments, we should look at Cheung Chau and other villages that we are trying to standardize things and to make the election process better, rather than somebody feeling that their rights have been deprived. Now, Mr. Ho, I just want to say one more point on the election methods. Now, even for electrical election, the methods of election has changed several times, from 2 seats to constituencies and moving to single seat, and this is true also for the district council elections. So you've gone through changes from one system to another, so it is quite possible to amend the election methods. Of course, if you want to stick to the existing system, you can do so, obviously. But my view remains the same. If you do not make any amendment for changes, then we are not making much progress. Now, coming back to the VRs, if you look at the 2009 VR amendments in the bill, and I'm looking at the minutes of meeting, and I was in fact a member, so I remember about the Yuen Long Old Town, Old Market, whether it should be included in the annex in order to qualify as indigenous. In fact, the government blocked that move, but after extended debate, they were allowed to do so and became indigenous village. But in paragraph 14 of the report, paragraph 14, now I read it out, it's very short. Now, the members are generally in favor of changing the Yuen Long Old Town into the annex, but then the government has to be consistent so that those who are not listed, if in days to come they can be shown to have a VR before 1999, and then the Yuen Long Old Town system can be taken as an example and to be included in the annex. So after 1999, the VR election was deleted, but in the past they were allowed to do so, and definitely after 1898. Now, but coming back to Cheung Chau or Ping Chau, if they can prove that the village existed in 1898, and then in the 1980s there was a VR election, then the requirements would have been met, as stated in paragraph 14. So this is my question, Mr. Lee. I think, Mr. Ho, you raised a point about the discussion in the past. The important thing is in 1898, whether it was a village, whether it fulfilled the legal requirement that it is or it was a village. Now, in other words, if you are established as a village before 1898, if you can show evidence, then you would qualify. The indigenous people were not allowed to qualify because they could not show that they were original villages in 1898 or before 1898. But then they could show proof in court that they were indigenous 1898. So maybe I ask Mr. Lee to answer. Now, for the Yuen Long Old Market, in 1999 they did not have an election system, but under Japanese occupation they did have such a system, and there was a VR. but they did not use indigenous villages. I looked at the Cheung Chao documents. Yeah, they had this system, the last one being in the 1990s. But now you say that they don't count because in 1898 it was not an indigenous village. But I look at the Gazette, then it was a village, but yet you claim that it was not a village. Now, as to whether it was a village, the Gazette already made it clear. Now, for the Cheung Chao arrangement, in 1898 it was not a village. In our documents, it never had any VR election. Now, some documents, not official ones, they claim to be a village representative, but in the Rural Committee Constitution, those representatives were Kai Phong representatives and not VRs. And they never had any such VR elections. Now, that being the case, okay, they have the Kai Phong elections. Of course, they won't have VR because the Kai Phong system obviously is later than 1898. You wouldn't find VRs there, but they have a bunch of village representatives as shown on some of the papers, but you claim that they were not indigenous ones. If you ask the Kai Fongs, then of course they would not recognize that. Now, but our legal system allows that if there was a village in 1898, and if there were elections, and even though those stopped in 1990, if you can prove that there was VR elections in 1898, then you should include that to be a double VR system. So it's a matter of proof, isn't it? It's just that you don't accept their proof. Yeah, that is the case. Now, can I ask that a simple paper be prepared to handle all these documents? I don't want us to ignore what has been dealt with in the past, because there were only several documents, and it's a gazette, and there's one I don't know the name. It's a certain Cheung Chao journal, and you could see that there is a Cheung Chao village representative, a certain number of names. I think in 2009 we already had a similar discussion. I'm asking the legal advisor, so maybe you can dig out the. Don't ask me to dig it up. Can you help me? I've got one and give you a copy. Okay, because the secretary has one. Yes, it's produced in 2009. Yes, you were there. Yeah, you were in the group. So we did produce such documents, and we could make it available to members. Okay, now any other questions? Now, okay, now we are going back to Mr. Ho's point. If there is any proof available that village existed before the cutoff date, and if such evidence can be shown, well, or if such cannot be shown, then we will have to abide by the decision. And we already had ample discussion on this. Yes, now just very quickly, it did not handle the gazettes. Yes, it does. Where is it? Maybe I ask the LA to help. Now, if you are talking about paper 22 CB 2156, It's CB 5809. Yes, yes. And what page? Oh, paragraph 17. Paragraph 17. Okay, I'll take it back to have a look, so I can at least give an explanation to them. Okay, members, any other views? Now, otherwise, now in fact, the LA, as on the 2nd of December 2013, wrote to the government asking that for certain clarifications, and this is paper CB2 575 13 to 14, and the government has already given a reply. Maybe the LA can take us through this. Now, I think at this stage, Chair, I've asked the government about the indigenous population in Cheongcha and Pengchao, and the response was very clear, as we heard just now. And it seems that both parties were relying on different documents, and the government felt that the documents that the VR relied on was not quite sufficient. Now, but then on the wording and so on, and if you move to the clause by clause, then I will highlight some of those points that we can pay more attention to. Now, if we don't have any further observations, we can proceed to clause by clause scrutiny. And we can resort to CB2, the markup copy, 4/13 to 14. Now, because it's pretty thick, the whole bundle, and the changes are really very, very little. Now, so following our procedures, we have to go through each and every clause, and you have to go through each and every one of them, I'm afraid. So my proposal is that if the wordings get repeated, I would just read it out and consider it done. Otherwise, in other cases, there will need to be clarification and explanation. Now, so if that's agreeable, we'll start from the first page on the village representative election ordinance. Ask Mr. Lee to supplement. Yes, now the aim is to expand the legal framework to include the Kaifong representatives. Now, we will have a slightly bigger area, scope, to replace now the Kaifong and the VR. So this is certain replacement to use the Chinese 鄉郊 to 代表 to represent 鄉村. So the scope becomes wider.
Okay. So if the chairman and members have no objection, I will not be referring to the replacement of a village by rural. All right, members, any comments? But then we've received a letter from the Heung Yi Kok requesting that the name should not be rural representative election. They are of the view that the name of the bill should be Village Representative Election and Rural Representative Election Legislation Amendment Bill. Chairman, in fact, we've agreed with the Heung Yi Kok that the title will be Rural Representative Election legislation. In fact, that was the initial agreement, but then the Hung Yi Kok subsequently wrote to us expressing concerns about the status of the VRs, and we explained to the Hung Yi Kok that VRs still played an important role in the rural representative elections. And also the term village representative still existed in our legislation. And then third, we wanted our legislation to be concise and clear. So I want to say that in fact village representatives and Kai Phong representatives are both rural representatives, and we don't want to cause any confusion with regard to our legislation, and we in fact did explain our position to the Hung Yi Kok. We wanted the legislation to be clear and concise, and the rural representative in fact would include both village representatives and Kai Phong representatives. Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Chairman, I am inclined to support the Deputy Director's explanation because I understand that there are some village representatives on Peng Chau, but then on Chang Chau there are only Kai Phong representatives. And if we adopt the title suggested by the Hung Yi Kok, people may get the wrong impression that there are also village representatives on Chang Chau. I think rural representative is an all-embracing term, and so I would tend to agree with the administration. Thank you. Any questions? I just want to remind members that there was the suggestion from the Hung Yi Kok. Right, I think we can move on to page 2, interpretation. Yes, Chairman. In fact, there are new definitions, mainly on page 7, what is meant by rural representative, what is meant by rural ordinary election. Page 7. Because the other amendments involve the substitution of village by rural. Let's go through this document page by page. That would be easier for us. Page 2. Again, village representative will become rural representative, and then village becomes, or rather, the area becomes rural area. All right. Any questions? No. Page 3 now. Deputy Director. Resident includes the residents of existing villages and the residents of market towns. Any questions? Chairman, after this round of amendments, is it that all the problems will have been resolved? What do you mean? Will we have other cases like Chang Chau or Peng Chau? Is it that we'll be able to cover in the legislation all market towns? All market towns will be covered in the legislation. In other words, Chang Chau and Peng Chau. And then Ching Yi, because on one occasion we mentioned Ching Yi. But the market town election was abolished in 1998. So can certain elections resume? If people can provide evidence that they are market towns, then maybe they'll have a case. But according to our understanding, in fact, all existing market towns have been covered. Is that right, Deputy Director? Yes. Right. Again, page 4, rural representative. Page 5. Village representative becomes rural representative. And then we have the village becoming the area. Then the by-election becomes the rural by-election. All right, page 6, Deputy Director, a village, and then that's the same. And then we have what is meant by Kai Fong representative. In relation to a market town means a holder of the office of Kai Fong representative established for the market town under section 6A1. And then rural ordinary election, we have the definition here. Then rural representative, office of rural representative, again we are providing definitions here. Right, any questions? Legal advisor. I think there is some discrepancy between the Chinese version and the English version. Please refer to B. 72B in relation to a vacancy arising. But I just want to say that in English we don't have this problem, but in English we have the words office vacated, but then in Chinese there are different translations. But then in Chinese we have 出缺 meaning the vacancy, and then 離任 meaning the person. I can accept the administration's explanation, but this is a definition, and so those who read the Chinese text may not understand, because you're referring to 72B and 73B, but then the term 出缺 is not used. So can the drafting division confirm that people will not get confused although different terms are used? Yes, Chairman. As the legal advisor has pointed out, 出缺 refers to the office, and 離任 refers to the person holding the office. And even if or when different terms are used, we don't think there will be any confusion caused, and we do not think that there is a need to propose an amendment. But we understand the legal advisor's concern, and in fact we've provided a written response. In other words, if someone leaves the office, then of course a vacancy arises. Page 7. All right, no need to cover village and rural. Again, by election, market town. Right? Any questions? No. Page 8. Page 8. Maps, and we are now extending the requirements for maps of villages to maps of market towns. Then that's the new 3A. Any questions? No? Page 9. Right, again, rural representative, 6A. And in fact, it's to extend the present arrangement to the office of Kai Fong representative for market towns, for example, the commencement date and so on and so forth. No questions? Page 10. Again, the same terms, and then page 11, again the same terms, page 12. 6, please, subsection 6. Under what circumstances an existing a village will no longer have a the resident representative, and this will be extended to market towns. In other words, if he is no longer a resident of the market town, then he will no longer be the representative. What is meant by the person ceasing to be a resident of the market town? Now, those who want to be a Kaifong representative must have lived in the market town for 6 years and must be living in the market town. My question is, what is the definition of ceasing to be a resident of the market town? Yes, moved. What if he is living elsewhere and the address is still there? We need his primary or principal residential address. Say if we receive a complaint that the Kaifong representative is no longer living there, then we may require the Kaifong representative to make a declaration or to provide some proof. And then we'll decide whether the Kaifong representative has to be disqualified. But what if he thinks he is still living in the market town when the government feels or thinks he is not? Mr. Ma. If we receive a complaint, we'll carry out investigation. We will have a site visit. We look at whether the house is still there. We'll require the person to provide residential proof, and we'll also check the latest address with the immigration department, the REO, or the housing department. And if we discover that the person has moved out and is no longer residing at that address, then he is no longer qualified as a voter, and he is no longer a qualified voter. He can't be qualified as a Kaifong representative. So you will take away from him his voter registration. Yes. Through what means? Through Gazetto or legislative means? Through publishing a notice in the Gazette. So maybe he has lived there for 6 years, and then he moves out for a short period of time. Will he be disqualified as a voter? Chairman will have to look at the actual circumstances. Say he is a Kaifong representative, but then he has been sent to an overseas study course by his company for say 2 months. So he is still ordinarily resident in Changchao, and he is leaving the place only on a temporary basis. Then he will not lose his status as a voter. Alright, so we can now move on to page 13. Again, a change of the terms. Then page 14, directed to declare vacancy in office of the rural representative. Again, the terms are changed. So let's move on to page 15. Section 15, who is eligible to be registered as an elector. 3A, Deputy Director. That is to extend the arrangements for VR elections to the elections of the Kaifong representative election. Legal advisor. 3A. In fact, this is modeled on the existing section 15 3. So can one be an elector because he is registered as an elector? I want to say that the wording is not entirely the same, and so I agree that the new version is better than the old version, and I've asked the administration why the old version has not been changed, but then according to the administration, as the meaning is also clear, there's no need to change the old version. But it seems that there is a lack of consistency in the same section. Why? So why is it that you haven't made it too consistent, Deputy Director?
Yes, thank you for raising this, LA. And as you said, in the new one, we are trying to use a slightly better terminology. But then the meaning is really the same, and that is why we did not change the original section 3 amended. Even though the terms are not the same, the meaning is the same. Yes, but why don't you change it? Well, okay, we'll take it back and consider it. Now, if you feel that the new 3A has a slightly better wording, might as well change the term as well in the other section. Okay, yeah, thank you. Moving on, page 16. It's also on the same topic. 5A, you've got to change that. Yes, to extend the village representative, to expand the scope to rural representative, to say when a person is not eligible. And then the next one has to do with the actual qualifications. 2 or more existing villages may be registered for only one of those villages of that person's choice. Yes, the other words are the consequential word arrangement changes. And then page 17 again, it's also the word village becoming rural. Page 18, part 4, conduct of election, again is only the change of the terms. And all the way to 19 is also the same changes. Now, please stop me if you spot anything, members. I just want to be more efficient, and I'm not going to repeat what has already been covered. Okay, page 20, you have who is eligible to be nominated as a candidate. This clarifies who is eligible, and we've taken reference from the VR qualifications that he has to reach 21 years old, has been a resident for 6 years, and all the rest of it. Yes, we have the same problem of lack of consistency. If you look at the new 2A, it says a person is eligible only if the person blah blah blah, this in English the word only applies in both the old and new, but then in the Chinese section the equivalent of only is not there. So there is a lack of consistency in the old and new in the Chinese version. Now, if you change this, then section 20 has to change, and 22.1 and 22.2 has to change as well. Now, this is only a linguistic change. The meaning is not affected. Now, under E, you have and. So, you have to fulfill all A, B, C, D, E, and F. So we don't feel any difficulty in interpreting the words. So all the sections have to be fulfilled. We don't really feel the need to modify paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, or bracket 1 and bracket 2. Now, what do members think? because if you were to change it, you have to change the other 2 bits as well. I'm not going to insist on this like I did for the previous one. Okay, moving on. 21, again, the change in terminology only. 22, you have 5, bracket 5. You have an addition there. Yes, this is to extend the village election requirement, extending it to the Kai Phong representative requirement, and showing when somebody will be disqualified. Okay, so 23, number and qualifications of subscribers to a nomination form, only the terminology change. And when you get to page 24, you have 6A. Now again, this is to apply the VR election requirements to the Kai Phong representative election arrangement. So to avoid doubt, the person has in one of those capacities subscribed the specified number of nomination forms and so on. Right, so all these are added. Okay, the remaining parts are terminology changes only. Now page 25, death or disqualification of a validly nominated candidate before the date of election, only a terminology change. Page 26, what is to happen if insufficient number of candidates is nominated for village. Page 27, only terminology changes, including the system of voting and counting of votes. Page 28, again the same thing. 29, returning officer to publish result of election, same thing. Page 30, election petitions, also the same thing. And if you go from 31, 32, 30, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, you have the same thing until you get to page 38, when you have a bracket 4 inserted. Now this is to show that the Kai Phong representative for Market Town is, by virtue of being such a Kai Phong representative, a member of the rural committee specified in column 5. No question? Okay. Page 39. The secretary may amend the schedule. Now at the moment is 1, 2, 3, but the amendment is a new 3A, new Market Town, and section 70, because this is the first time and you have transitional provisions applicable only to the first election. And this will be expanded when we get to Annex 6. Yes. Is page 42. Page 42, Schedule 6. That the first elections to be held in 2015. Yes, so members, please turn to page 42. Any question? This is transitional provisions. No questions? Okay. Moving back to page 40, Schedule 3. you have Schedule 3A. So, Mr. Lee, this shows very clearly Market Town and where it stands in the map, and then the date of establishment, and also the number of persons to hold the office. Okay, if there are no questions, page 41. This refers to the previous election. We have discussed the Schedule 6 already, so we now move on to page 43. You have Electoral Affairs Commission registration of electors regulation. So this takes us to C. So again, extending the village arrangement to market towns. Any questions? So page 44. Yes, Mr. Lee. Now this says that the market town register, you have a division of that register set apart under section 3A. And if there's nothing further to raise, moving on to page 45 and 46. Mr. Lee? Yes, only minor changes in wording. And then you have the interpretation or the definition for market town, market town's provisional register, market town's register, and rural area, or the final register for market towns. So this is just to give the definition. Okay, no question here. Page 47. Mr. Lee, on item C in particular, though it says that for a particular year, the market town's provisional register as a reference to the final for market town. So this is similar to section 2A, following the village representative election method now being applied to the Kaifong representative election. Okay, page 48. Structures of indigenous villages and composite indigenous villages register. So Mr. Lee, now 3A, structure of market towns register. Now this extends the VR election method to the Kaifong representative election method. Okay, page 49, we add in market towns register. And page 50, ERO, to determine whether or not applicant is eligible for registration. And you have added two new sections, C and bracket 5. Now again, this is to extend the VR election arrangement to the market town arrangement. And for item 5, we've again taken reference from the VR election register and extended to the market town register arrangement. Any question? Yes, a legal advisor. We're talking about section 11, bracket 1. And you already have 1A, B, and then you insert C. Now, in English, you have word must, but Chinese is so. But if you look at A and B, the English must is rendered bit so in Chinese. So within the same section, the same meaning, there's a lack of consistency. So I just want to point this out.
Yes, the Government Council, please. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thank the legal advisor for pointing this out. In fact, we've given a written reply to the legal advisor. In fact, previously we used the word shall, and for shall, the Chinese translation was so, then must be so. But then in under the new drafting style, we use must and no longer shall. And so for must, we just have the Chinese is so. But then we're of the view that both so and be so mean a compulsory requirement, and so we don't think there is a need to change A and B. So you're no longer going to use shall. So why is it that you are not changing all the must to be so? Because you will no longer be using the word shall. Yes, we'll consider the chairman's suggestion. All right. Page 51 now. Registration in Indigenous Villages and Composite Indigenous Villages Register 14A is to extend the arrangements to cover the market towns register. Legal advisor. In fact, for Section 14 and Section 14A again is this discrepancy between soy and beet soy. So 14A is essentially modeled on Section 14, and we have soy as well as beet soy used. Yes, do please consider this matter. Next, ERO to inform applicants of determinations and decisions, right? 2A, again this is to extend the arrangements for villagers to market towns. Yes, that's why we've got 2A. And then 3, so the register will apply to all types of rural representative elections. Legal advisor is the same issue. 15.1, 15.2, 15.5, B soy is used, but then 2A soy is used. So it's the same issue. So please do consider this issue raised by our legal advisor. I think we all want to see consistency. Page 53. ERO to have power to require information to prepare registers. After we've legislated, the ERO can require certain information, and so apart from existing villages and indigenous villages, market towns will also be covered. Page 54. ERO may make inquiries about persons registered in existing final register. So we have A to I. Deputy Director, again it's to extend the arrangements for villagers to market towns. And then for the drafting, A and the original A and the original F are merged. So the main purpose is to extend the arrangements to cover Kaifong representative elections. Right, any questions? No? Page 55 then. So section 17.2, Deputy Director is to merge the two because the arrangements were applied to all three types of elections. Page 56, again only the terms. 57, page 57. The first amendment also are the terms only. Then 4A, this is modeled on subsection 4. The arrangements for the compiling of the provisional register are applied to market towns. Legal advisor? Yes, Chairman. Again, we have the same problem. Sections 4 and 5, 必須, and then 4A, only 須 appears. And then please refer to the existing 4A Roman 2. Despite any information to the contrary received by the ERO. But then the Chinese translation for despite is different. I just 縱使 and 即使 the meaning is the same, but then the words used are different. So what is your suggestion? So if the administration feels that 即使 is preferred, then 即使 should also be used for 4A2 because it's the same word, despite. We are of the view that the meaning is the same, Chairman. But if members want us to make the wording consistent, then we will see whether we should amend subsection 4. I think the change should be made. Thank you. I think the administration should take the opportunity to make the wording consistent, because we won't be able to spot all such inconsistencies. We will have to go through the entire bill, but then we want the administration to understand what we want, right? Page 58 again, only the term. 59, page 59, nothing. Page 60 again, only the term. Page 61, only the term. Page 62, again, only the term. And also adding market towns. Page 63. Deputy Director? States the meaning of Kai Fong representative, and it's the meaning is the same as in 21A. Right, page 64. Who can or who may make a claim? Section 24. Right, B2 or C2, Deputy Director. Apart from B2, C2, in other words, those not mentioned in A, B, but whose name is not recorded in the relevant provisional register. These people can also make a claim. All right, page 65. Again, the term 66, 67, no change. 68, the term only. 69, no change. 70, again the terms. 71, the terms only. 72. And we have 35. Because we're going to have the first Kai Fong representative elections and under the law, and that's why there will be transitional provisions. And the schedule sets out the transitional provisions, including when to apply for registration in the first market towns provisional register and the arrangements for the compilation of the first market towns provisional register. Right, so that's in fact on page 74, nothing. Page 75, the term. Page 76, again only the term. Page 77, no change. Page 78 and page 79, some deletions. Right? 80, page 80, all right. These have been dealt with, no need to deal with them again. Page 80, legal advisor. Chairman, I want to say something about computer, because there will be a procedure concerning counting of votes by using computers, and so there is a need to define computer. So computer in relation to the counting of votes includes any device and computer software that is designed and programmed to count the votes cast at an election. All right. So we're talking about device and computer software, but for the English version, device and computer software So here, computer and or device and computer software is regarded as one item. So it's device and computer software means the two are regarded as one unit or one item. In other words, because that is its use. So will designed and programmed merely applies to computer software and not device. But we don't have this problem in the Chinese version. So will there be this problem? Yes, Government Council. No, yes, this is grammatically correct. Device and computer software, we think they are a compound unit. But in the light of the legal advisor's concern, we'll look at whether an amendment is needed. But yes, I agree with the legal advice. Yes, this is grammatically correct. Because if you don't just have the software and not the device, of course you can't count the votes. So I think the English version is grammatical, right? So please consider the legal advisor's point. All right, page 81, the term. Page 82, again only the term. Page 83, only the term, or the terms. 84, the terms only. 85, the same. Page 86, the terms only. 87, the same. 88, also the terms. 89, concerning the regulations, the procedures, again the terms only. Page 90, at 4, subsection 4, Deputy Director, please. Yes, thank you, Chairman. 4B, concerning the arrangements applying to resident representatives for an existing village, indigenous inhabitant representative for an indigenous village, or composite indigenous village, these arrangements will be extended to market towns. Right? We're now on page 91. Page 91.
Okay, Mr. Lee. Yes, some terminology changes, and also on election arrangement. Now again, it's applying the VR arrangements to the KFR arrangements and separated into 3 sections, 1, 2, and 3. Right, as a KFR for market town. Okay, 92, terminology changes only. 93, adding the 3 subsections, the Little Roman 1, 2, and 3. 94, only terminologies, same for 95. Page 96. 97, again the same changes. 98, 99, same thing. Page 98, Chair, has to do with the blue bill handling the consequential wording arrangement. I just want to comment on section 5A, Roman little 2, now deleting the village, becoming the rural representative, or crossing out that village, becoming that rural area. Now in the past, the government, when proposing these changes, and it will state very clearly in the blue bill which particular section or subsection. It will say that this is 21(5)(a) bracket little 2. Now, but this present exercise for the blue bill, let me just flip through the pages. It's C1822. It only says section 21, and not particularly easy to find. It only has the page number because you have 6 sections. So this is just one such example. Now there are other examples that I mentioned in the letter. Only which section, but not any subdivisions. So this deviates from past practice. Can somebody answer the question? Yes, thank you, LA, for raising this. Now in the schedule, if you want to find the right section, you can definitely find it. Now the reason for doing this is because you have to have a bilingual text. Now in page 1822 there are 3 different ways to say refer to the same thing. You have 有關, 該. But in the English, you only have this and then that village. But also under paragraph 12, if you change the Chinese into the smaller sections, it will not match the English text. So you won't be able to have a parallel text. So we just simplified this to section 21, so that we can match this to section 21. But anyone can find the same thing. Now, the LA's point is that it deviates from past practice. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? Now, this is using a new method of standardizing the wording changes to the annex, and we want to list all these changes. But in the past, you have to move them to the previous annexes or schedules. But now it's all grouped one another, grouped together, so you can see everything in the schedule. The LA has, well, coming back to this paragraph 12, you want it to be a parallel text. Now, in English, you only have A and B, but in Chinese, you have A, B, and C. So I don't see why you cannot change section 12 into two parts. It's just that you will have one more section. Now, any views from members, if you want to be more detailed, then you can find it easier. Now, I'm not a lawyer. It may be clear from the angle of a lawyer. Now, I think what the law draftsman is trying to do is to make the bill easier to use. Now, I think members will have to consider, now if you use the government's logic and you will extend it to just the first part, and then you will have to find all 30 sections. Because if you right now, if you only show the section and not the subdivisions, you may become well, less accurate. Now, my view is that if it's more direct, it should be better. And you are not talking about many, and I think clearer presentation should be better, because we are raising our concern here. And if there are more, then it would take a lot of time to dig up the right situation. Yes, we do have our difficulties, and I will discuss with the LA to come up with a best solution. Okay? Alright, page 99 now. Just a wording change. Page 100 to 101, same linguistic changes. 102, 103, only terminology changes. 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, nothing on 110, 111, only terminology changes. Nothing on 112 and 113, 114, 115, 9A, on the order situation in the polling station. It's what we call a consequential amendment. So yes, just changing the number. Yes, 47 bracket 6. 116. The form of the ballot paper, Mr. Lee. Now for Market Town, if there is a vacancy, you need to have the right form as set out in Schedule 1. Okay, so this is to follow the Market Town election procedure. Okay, if no question, page 117. Question to person applying for ballot paper. You have an additional paragraph in B. So this is extending village to rural, and the rural having a wider scope. So the addition of the Market Town included. 118 to 119, only changes in terminology, except for 119 there is paragraph D. Now again, this is for the village arrangement extending to the Market Town arrangement, and the person must be issued a ballot paper. So yes, because we've included Market Town. Now again, a drafting issue for paragraph 4 on page 119. Now in 4ABC, you have the Chinese word ta, but the using the gender neutral term. So in paragraph D, you use 個人. Now, but for 4A, B, and C, the word ta is used, but in 4D, 個人 is used. And also in their principles for amendment, then they agree to make changes. Now, the government's response is that A, B, C, and D are not very close to one another. In fact, we asked the draftsman why you are going to stick to this. Now, we're going to use 個人 in most cases, except that in this case, as pointed out by the LA, if we are going to make the changes or to be standardized or rationalized, it will result in many changes, because in legal status the two terms are the same, and that's why we did not make any changes in this round. But if the chair and the LA feel that we must change it in 4A, B, and C to render the term ta into 個人, we will go back and think about, consider doing this. But just to respond to the LA, when we did that, we pointed out that as far as the law is concerned, the two words mean the same thing. Now, how many more tas are there under discussion? Now, Chair, now on page 119, whether you're looking at paragraph 3, 4, or 6, the word ta appears. If you want to change, it can be pretty substantial. But because there is no difficulty in the legal interpreting, there's no need to change. Well, in that case, why don't you just use ta or keep the ta instead of using 個人?
Yes, we can go back and think about this. Because you use ta in 3ABC and then suddenly you use 個人. So I think there should be consistency. You know, in fact, these are very near to each other, legal advisor. And we have the same problem with the English version. ABC, he is used, and then the person. So we have the same problem in both the English and the Chinese versions. Deputy Director? Now I have this suggestion, Chairman. Of course, we will consider the suggestions made by the Chairman and the legal advisor after the meeting. But then, because we have many such examples in the ordinance, so we'll try to make sure that there is consistency within a particular section. That will be simpler and easier. Yes, I agree. But as this is within the same section, I think there should be consistency. So either you change ta to goyan or goyan to ta. But I agree with our legal advisor. That is, there should be consistency in the use of terms within the same section. All right. Page 120. No change. 121. And this is on the voting arrangements. We suggest that at the next Kai Phong representative election, as there will be quite a lot of electors want to give some flexibility to the district office or the HAD so that computer counting of votes can be carried out. But of course, we do understand the possible difficulties and problems. So we will do some trials to see whether we should rely on computer counting of votes. But then the amendment allows the Home Affairs Department, or gives the Home Affairs Department this flexibility to adopt computer counting of votes. But then whether we're counting votes by computer or whether we're doing manually, what's important is that we comply with the relevant requirements. So for computer counting, the ballot paper must not be folded. But then when if the votes are counted manually, we should make sure that the ballot paper is folded. Oh, sorry, I don't know that it's already time. And even if we extend the end time by 15 minutes, we won't be able to complete clause by clause scrutiny. Yes, so should we adjourn now, or should we extend the end time by 15 minutes? In fact, we've overrun by 4 minutes already. Any objection? I think the amendments are simple. Mr. Albert Ho. But I want to ask a question about section 48, page 123. You can vote for a number of candidates not exceeding the number of indigenous, or rather, may vote for a number of candidates not exceeding the number of Kai Phong representatives to be returned for the market towns at the election concerned. In fact, this is in the schedule. Mr. Ma, please. Page 123. 3A. Or how do you decide on the number of Kai Phong representatives to be returned for the market town? So do members agree that we should finish now, or let's have another meeting, right? So let's deal with this issue, this question raised as the whole first, and then we'll fix the date of the next meeting. Schedule 3A, Cap 576, it specifies how many Kai Phong representatives there are for the different market towns. 39 for Changchao, 17 for Pingchao. Which page in the marked up copy, please? Legal advisor, can you assist?
48.
Which page, please? Page 48. Page 48. We've dealt with that page already. Page 40. That's page 40. Schedule 3A. Schedule 3A, Market Town. Pingchao 17, Changchao 39. All right, thank you. Thank you. So these figures or numbers are prescribed by law, and if there is to be any amendment, then the schedule needs to be amended. Yes, correct. All right. Let's go back to 47. Now, Chairman, I think we should have another meeting. Give me some time to think. I agree, we won't have enough time. So let's just deal with 47. So they're proposing to delete the entire section 47, and then this section is rewritten. 1A, concerning electors in custody. Now, in 2009, there was a court case, and as a result, the legislation had to be amended. And at the time, the Cap 541F and then 57.2A was amended, and there were certain arrangements for electors in custody, but we can't find any arrangements here, because we can't see electors in custody in the revised version. It merely says that all the electors will have this right, and the Director of Home Affairs will determine the arrangements. Yes, what about electors in custody? Now, we haven't specified such arrangements because concerning the 4 steps, I think the 4 steps cover persons in custody. And then as to whether the ballot papers need to be put in envelopes. Now, in fact, for the LegCo election, for the district council election, the arrangements are the same. For the LegCo election, envelopes not necessary. District councils envelopes necessary, because for LegCo there are only 5 constituencies, and so the name of the constituency is written at the back of the ballot paper, and so there's no need to rely on the envelope. We're talking about over 8,000 villages, and we can't have the name of the village at the back of the ballot paper, so that's why we need the envelopes. So in fact, we do have envelopes for all village representative elections, but when there are by-elections and only say several villages are involved, we may not need to use envelopes. We can write the names of the villages or at the back of the ballot paper. So we just want to give ourselves some flexibility, but we will of course make sure that casting of the vote is kept confidential, and we will inform the electors of the voting arrangements. So they just want to have some flexibility. All right. 121, and then 122, nothing. 123, we will deal with. I'll start from page 123 next time. Date of next meeting, 7th of February Friday 8:30. AOB, right? That would be after the Chinese New Year, right? So I wish you all a very prosperous year of the horse.